Welcome back, everybody. Alex, we're gonna do another would you rather scenario. So as we, start developing this segment, would you rather, we just coming up with ideas and concepts of just two different subject matters of which one would you better or want to be involved in. We'll give the pros and cons of each situation, and then the final say of which one would you rather be in. So for today's topic, Alex, would you rather invest in multifamily properties or single family properties? Let's first start off with the pros and cons of each. What you got?
The pros and cons of each, I would say with single families, and speaking from, we're long-term investors. We don't, we're not Airbnb people or flippers or anything. On a long-term perspective, single families, I think, are more family-based. I think families are comfortable with renting long-term, and if you have a great long-term tenant, then that's awesome. It's fantastic. I mean, not having to worry about turning over the property and then getting it back on the market and having that expense every single time. With multifamilies, you don't really see that. Someone might stay there, I mean, maybe what, 3 years max or something, and then they're kind of looking to move out. Um, there for people that like the appreciation aspect, single families appreciate, I think, more than multifamilies, because the multifamilies are directly dependent on what the income is bringing in. Because when you sell a multifamily, the only ones really looking to buy those pretty much are investors. I mean, they want to know what the cash flow is and what they can make off the property. They have really no interest in, if it's got marble countertops and stuff. Whereas on a single family aspect, you could sell to a family, or, on a personal aspect rather than for investment.
So for me, for the pros and cons, I think that you brought up a lot of good points. The appreciation aspect of it, the fact that with single families you can sell your opportunity to sell is way higher than with multifamilies. Like you said, with multifamilies, there are, you'll be selling to an investor. With single families, you could sell to an investor or you could sell to somebody that's looking to own or occupy the place. Some other good things that you brought up was with single family is people stay there for a longer period of time. That is very true. Every single family property that I have never yet. I have never had to move out a tenant yet on a single family property. Multifamilies, the turnover is way higher. Of course, people are more congested together. People move up in their life, get better income, want to maybe buy, rent, a different side of town. It gives them the flexibility to move and things like that. But the real pros and cons for me is the pros for single family is the longevity, but I don't see because it's less turnover, the ability to supersize the rent, especially on the turnover aspect, you don't get that, but you still get that longevity. Um, that is a pro. One of the cons for single families is if you have most people have mortgages on their properties that they're renting, that you're dependent on a singular income source with that single family. So if that family lose their job or the family move out, then until you rehab the place and until you get a new tenant in there, you're responsible for the mortgage and upkeep until you get more income. With multifamilies on that aspect, the turnover is more, and then of course with more turnover, that means turnover costs. Turnover costs is a thing that will hamper a landlord tremendously if you have a lot of turnover over and over and over again. So just FYI out there for people that's looking to get into the multifamily space. I have one. I don't recommend it just because the turnover aspect is way higher. Uh, but getting one unit, um, the turnover there is probably the fastest out of any unit or efficiency units, getting an apartment that got a lot of efficiency units and one, one bedroom, one bath unit. Unless you're selling it to somebody, I mean, unless you're renting it to somebody that, you know, older and established in life. If you rent it to somebody that's in their 20s or 30s, of course, relationships happen, family happens, kids happen, and then they outgrow the space way faster than you like. So that's a major turnover point there. So turnover will be the thing that could crush landlords' cash flow because depending on where you're at, turnovers can cost, 2,500, $3,000, $5,000, and in most cases, it's cost more than the deposit that you even receive from the tenant themselves. But a pro of being in uh, multifamily is once you turn it over, and then if you're in a good location where the demand is high, then you can push the demand for rents higher. You can push the cost of living higher there. Every turnover, you can, up that rent to getting more from somebody else. So that's really one of the pros of it. Another con for multifamilies is the meter situation. Make sure when you buy in multifamilies, if that's the way you go, you want a separate meter. You want a separate meter so that cost is passed off to the tenant because single meters, usually the landlord has to deal with it and they got to find, a formula to get the money from the tenant, or they just eat the cost. So that's another element of multifamilies that sucks. And I've been in situations where it was single meter water meters, and then I had to pay to individually meter each of the units just to get rid of that situation. So those are just some of the pros and cons that I see on my side. So Alex, with that, now the answer to the would you rather, if you had to pick one, which one would you do, multifamily or single family property?
Yeah, you took some points from me because I was gonna go into my answer with some of the things that you said. Because yeah, I mean, technically those are other pros and cons, but I was gonna say the one I would pick would be multifamily, and the reasoning because there's higher cash flow. Um, Even with the turnover, I think if you're a great operator, as like the guys on One Run at a Time and Dion Talks Finance, how they always talk about, if you're a good operator, you're always consistent with your properties, you take it serious. I think that's the problem with a lot of mom and pop landlords is like they just, oh, I've got a property and oh, Jerry who rents it is such a good guy. I don't want to raise rents. And so then you get into these like relationships with your tenants. That's not doing business right. That's not conducting anything correctly as a landlord. So if you stay on top of what your financials look like throughout the year and raising rents accordingly, making sure that the revenue and the profit coming in is consistent, then I think that multifamilies can produce a lot more for you, especially if your goal is to eventually live off of rent. If your goal is to use rental income to replace what you're actively making at a workplace, then multifamily would be the biggest way to get out of that 9 to 5 rat race, in my opinion. I think single families are have their benefits. Like I said, we both, you and I, started with single families, and one of the craziest things for me with single families was like seeing the appreciation aspect. It like I was like, holy crap. I mean, to see how much appreciation you can get. But at the end of the day, as we always talk about, appreciation doesn't pay the bills. And the only way to get that appreciation is you refinance, and that depends on many factors, if you can even do that, or if it's even a good idea to do that. Or you sell the property, which you then might have to pay taxes unless you have a better tax strategy out there. But in the multifamily aspect, even with the turnover, it allows for better opportunities. Like you said, if you go ahead and remodel, and let's say you were collecting very under market rents because the tenant was in there before you got the property or something like that, a scenario like that. Once they move out, even if you have to turn it over, you can increase rents by, 20, 30% to what you were collecting beforehand. So there's a lot of benefits to it. And then of course, like the multiple units. allow you leverage on different aspects. Like if you have one unit paying the entire mortgage, and then you've still got two other units you can collect from, or three other units you can collect from, then I mean that's a great position to be in. So there's a lot of benefits to multifamily from a business cash flow perspective because there's just so much more income that comes from it. And to the single family point, I mean, I know there's investors that invest, just solely in single family. In that scenario, you just have to raise rents. I mean, don't be afraid to raise rents. I think that's people's biggest problem is they get so attached to that tenant and they like learn their whole life and they don't want to raise rents or anything. And you have to keep in mind it's your property at the end of the day. And as long as the rent that you're charging is fair and according to improvements you're doing and maintenance that you're doing, then you should not feel guilty for raising rents at all.
Right, yeah, I got about three things that and you hit on some of the points that I was going to say. With single families, it's more of a relationship base, and you see that with most mom and pop landlords, and they don't want to raise the rent. It's more relationship based. They know when their kids' birthdays are, and when the King Tierra is about to pop off. You get invited to parties and all kind of stuff when it's in the single family space. So you feel like more of a friendship than a business relationship with them. I like the single family aspect because of the longevity, but me of in the totality of it is I look at risk. I look at risk. And the reason why mom and pop landlords, and this is the biggest reason why mom and pop landlords don't like raising rent on single family homes. The reason why they don't like to raise rent because they have the fear that the tenant will move out. And then when the tenant moves out, they themselves don't have the capital set aside to take care of the property that they currently live in and the rental property. So that's one of the main reasons. And they just like, well, as long as this person is paying the rent and I might have to subsidize a little bit is way better than me having to pay the entire amount. So that aspect of it is very, very emotional and very bad operator-ish of them. And that's what you see.
Unacceptable.
Most people. Yeah, that's usually what it is. People don't operate, and then people always think any cash flow that come in, they just take it as income, and they're not, building the coffers, building the nut to be able to handle those risk scenarios. For me, also, the best, if this is a would you rather, if I had to pick one or the other, it would be multifamilies. Yeah, we talked about the cons of the turnover and all that stuff, the meters, different elements. Just because tenants are so close together, and like let's say a fourplex, fiveplex, or something like that, they're so close together. If one issue happens, especially if they stacked on top of each other, if one issue happened in one unit, it goes into another unit. So like let's say if you have a fourplex that's stacked on top of each other, if water leaks in the top unit, then the bottom unit is going to have damage also. So that's another con you have there with the multifamily space. And you can get one levels if that's your cup of tea. But again, focusing on risk, the reason why multifamilies would be my preferred if I had to choose one or the other, it would be because, and you alluded to it, you talked about the income side. I'm talking about the risk side. Is if I have a mortgage on there, and unlike single families, if one tenant leaves, the other tenants are still paying the mortgage. If two tenants leave, and I'm talking about in a fourplex, the other two tenants are still have the ability to pay the mortgage. So it takes that pressure or that risk off of me having to pay the mortgage where I live and the mortgage where the tenants live. So it alleviates more risk when you deal in multifamily, and then the multiples that you can when you increase rent, you increasing it times four if it's a fourplex. So you times two when it's a single family, it's always just times one. So you can get more income on the rent raise side of it also. So for me, because of the risk element of it, I would choose multifamily over single family.
I like this video. Probably like it more than our viewers will. But with all that being said, guys, you have any questions, let us know. Let us know what you guys would do or prefer to do, or what you guys actually do if you are investors. Don't forget to hit the like button, share this video, subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next one.